Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. We're here to discuss the economy beyond numbers. And it's a great honor for me to be with two widely known, widely respected commentators. Mr. Singhal has been writing about the economy, economic issues for years, for maybe decades now, right? Yeah, decades in some of the leading publications of India. Ms. Chakraborty is one of our leading economists. She does a lot of work in, I'm sorry if I'm getting any of this wrong, but macroeconomic policy and also with gender inclusion, things like that. So, yeah, it's a great honor for me. I just want to make a quick disclaimer in that I am primarily a novelist. I'm a fiction writer. So I have, this is not my area of expertise at all. But I have some rudimentary knowledge in economics, and I'm a layman, and I thought we'd keep it on those terms so that everyone can engage with the questions we ask. We won't keep it very technical and no numbers. So, well, so just to stick for a second, Lekha, can I call you Lekha? Yes, okay. So just to stick for a second with the title of the topic, the economy beyond the numbers. That actually points to an intellectual debate that's been going on in the field of economics for a long time. I know that, this is, we're talking about data being the kind of presiding sort of force. And I know there's a lot of economists, perhaps more old school, who who would prefer more ethnographic approaches or narrative-based approaches of teaching economics. And but in all the in academic circles, the data set is reigning supreme. So we are also living in an age of the data set now. There's increasingly more and more human activity is quantifiable and can be measured. Could you tell us a little bit about this? Like, can one truly now, with all this data that's out there, can you look at the economy beyond the numbers?
I do respect writers, before getting into answering that question, identifying what exactly has happened to you and taking out in terms of literature, that's a tough exercise, and I do respect, the people, who write. So thank you so much. So this is a different kind of a panel for me to be with a writer. Usually I do, technical sessions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I'm aware of, Rajrishi Singh's writing as well. Now, coming to your question about going beyond numbers and an approach which you suggested to look into quantitative and qualitative. So that exactly is the job of an economist. But when kids join economics course, suddenly the demand and supply ad hoc configurations will give you everything. So the kids are getting confused. What is the people-mattered approach that economists follow? So that's a question. But over time, we find out that there is a scope for a Q-squared approach, that we can do quantitative and qualitative. But as you mentioned right now, the satellite data, big data analysis. So Geeta Govindath, she looks at the satellite data and connect what has happened to, India after demonetization. So such exercises, because there is no growth numbers beyond a district or beyond state. So the sub-state growth cannot be captured. We don't have any data. So people look at the satellite luminosity or the night intensity and work, So it's a kind of a mixed approach, but I do respect your point that economy should go beyond numbers, beyond quantitative approach, and take a qualitative approach. As you said, the perception of poor by poor, the perception of a woman by woman. So those stories, that's worth running many econometric models. So you need to go and ask people and to understand. And that intuition is very important. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you recommend a kind of combined approach of using both ethnography and...
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
How interesting. Thank you. Sorry. I wanted to come to you, Mr. Singh. I was just in a session with Neha Dixit. I was listening to Neha Dixit speak. She's written a wonderful book which reports a lot on Delhi. It's called The Many Lives of Saida X. But, it's, again, a very intense approach at a woman working in the uh, unorganized economy, Muslim women working in the unorganized economy. And one of the things she talked about, this isn't piece, it's an anecdote, but she was talking about how before demonetization, no, sorry, before the pandemic, there was, they would use, she noticed people were using cooking oil. And after the pandemic now, in recent years, they're using water and just maybe adding a few drops of cooking oil. And she ascribed that to the kind of deep poverty that's set in many parts of northern India. And, for us, when we're reading about the economy, we get these kind of polarized reports because of the media nowadays. Some people are claiming everything is going wonderfully. Some people are claiming it's not at all. And it's hard to know which way it actually lies. What about things like the 2024 verdict not against Modi, but the UP verdict and things like that, which was that a function of the economy? Was that how much did the economic factors play a part in that?
Sorry. Thank you, Prayaag. Thank you, Mathrubhumi, for inviting me. So yes, the 2024 Lok Sabha election results have multiple layers, and you can't probably attribute them to one reason alone. But the state of the economy was certainly a factor. And since we're not supposed to cite numbers, a couple of anecdotes should go towards proving the point about the North, the economy in the North not doing so well. One is if you look at the migration numbers into, say, the city where I live, Mumbai, the trains from Uttar Pradesh coming in are full of agricultural labor who are surplus, who don't have means of income, and therefore stream into Mumbai almost every single day looking for opportunities to work and earn a living. And secondly, this is again slightly, moving away from the North, but it kind of reflects on the state of the North. I was looking at RBI data recently on states, and you'd be surprised to know, I'm just rooting for the state that I grew up in. West Bengal is the 6th highest state in terms of GDP in the country. So after Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and one more state somewhere, I think. So could be Haryana, I think. I'm sorry, I've forgotten now the 5th state, but West Bengal is the 6th richest state in the country. No, it is full, And so whenever you look at West Bengal and you look at, you hear this narrative about the state, in the pits, not growing, and because people are constantly looking at, the state of large industry. But the state has moved away from large industry into MSME. So today, West Bengal has the 2nd highest number of MSME units in the country after UP, higher than every other state. So they moved to MSME and they moved to service sector. So there's a huge boom in services. So I'm saying, we do not, because the narrative is so overwhelming, and the narrative about the North has been so overwhelming in terms of, media reports, in terms of rhetoric, in terms of, speeches that you hear in Parliament and elsewhere, that you don't really, you can't come to terms with the fact that the North is not, and there are pockets of affluence in North for sure. Gurgaon is a pocket of affluence, okay? Yeah.
It's a kind of external affluence.
Absolutely,
right? They're not,
yeah. But beyond that, I think North has a problem, for sure.
What about you? Do you have anything to say about West Bengal, perhaps, or?
Actually, I'm a Malayali. I'm married to Pinaki Chakraborty. So, looking at the growth numbers, in Kerala also, we are growing fast. And that reminds me the 16th Finance Commission debate. Like Kerala is growing very well. So that equity efficiency argument is on. Like if Finance Commission is supporting more states on the basis of equity principles, then we won't get money. And today is a Kerala budget and it's affecting the fiscal space. So growing, that's getting, penalized. So I just wanted to add only that.
So, sorry, just to supplement what she said, her answer to your first question. There is this book, I'm forgetting the name of the authors, it's my age, written by these two professors from Northwestern University. One's a economics prof and the other is a prof of Slavic languages and literature. And they've both jointly written this book saying how economics can borrow a lot from anthropology, sociology, from humanities, literature, and be the richer for it. And in some ways, they also lament the fact that in its early years, economics was primarily a philosophical exercise. You asked a question and you then sought to, find answers to that question. Why are we not doing well, or why is there poverty? And that quest, led to some answers or some probable answers. And that's the foundation for economics. But the fact is that it's become so hardly mathematics-based that philosophical quest has almost disappeared. And so while humanities, political science, sociology, anthropology borrow from economics, economics doesn't borrow from them, and it's the poorer for it.
And I would love to add to that point. That point of borrowing from the philosophy to the economics, I do agree to that. I read the Cambridge economist John Robinson's book, Economic Philosophy. So, it's like her thought process was like what goes around comes around, and she was talking about the term utility. But for economists, we heartless economists, utility is a very heartless term, utilitarian. But what she explained is that utility is such a metaphysical concept, and the moment you pin it down, it just becomes philosophy. So that's the level in which the economists look into the concepts like utility. But in classrooms, it's like utilitarian. It's like the business of life. Yes.
Thank you. So even I remember when J.D. Vance's book came out, that Hillbilly Elegy, and a lot of American commentators were talking about how that's how economic history should be written on. You get to see a community, you get to see what's happened, like the ravages of the community, and anyway, that's a different matter. But I had. So this is for you now, Doctor. So the economic survey recently predicted, a very low GDP growth rate for the year to come. So they've criticized the pace of reform in the economic survey, and they said the government needs to move faster on certain key issues. But what reforms do you see that are crucial as first? I mean, at least.
Okay,
what would you
thank you
prioritize?
for asking this question. The growth, that we need to perceive from two perspectives. One is the structural weaknesses in an economy, and the other is cyclicality. Like as a person, we also have cyclicality, ups and downs. We manage that. But RBI and North Bloc, they are focusing more on the policies, thinking that this downturn is just cyclical. So that, the narrative of fiscal policy is to become counter-cyclical fiscal policy. Or the RBI, it is a counter-cyclical monetary policy, like increasing rate of interest. Today is that RBI, that announcement came, the new RBI governor, Sanjeev Malhotra, his first MPC committee announcement, he reduced the rate of interest. Because, in the budget, we got a call that, fiscal policy is hitting that it's running the last mile, that we don't have any fiscal space to pump prime or to increase the capital spending. So now the ball is in your court. So let RBI do the magic by decreasing the interest rate. So when interest rate is low, then the investment can happen. But it is not a magic bullet that moment you decrease the interest rate, your economy is going to be on upturn. So we need to tackle with the structural weaknesses of the economy and structural reforms like labor codes, like power sector reforms. There are a lot of things to be undertaken to address the structural weaknesses. So I do feel that, okay, cyclicality is fine, but as Geeta Gopinath, again I am citing her, she has a paper that cyclist trend, like the downturn can be permanent scar. It is not the magical cyclicality which goes up. So the permanent scar of downturn, we need different policies to address, and we have to focus more on the structural reforms. Yeah.
So, sorry to put you on the spot.
He has a point.
Can I just add, sorry. So, again, since we're, going beyond numbers, what our budget doesn't actually tell you up front, but it says in the small print, is how large corporates have not been paying taxes. Taxes that the, salaried middle class employee pays. So if you look at the budget small print, it says that 2023, the effective tax rate paid by companies with more than 500 crore profit before tax. Sorry, to bring in that number in. Yeah. I plead guilty. But just to, illustrate the size of the company, large company, the effective tax rate was 19%. And that's likely to go down lower in 23-24. So, when we say that there is no fiscal space, I think there is space to increase taxes on large companies, primarily because when the rates were cut in 2019, they were cut on the premise that these large companies would invest in new factories, create more jobs, but none of that has happened actually. In reality, what has happened is as profits have gone up, CEOs and promoters have enriched themselves. And so the CEO income versus the median employee's income is about 300 to 500 times. And, and it's just going up. So interest rates, cutting interest rates is all fine, but I don't think it's a magic bullet. It can't solve a problem that is so deeply structural.
I just want to add one point to the corporate. It's a global issue. And, the capital is always mobile. So we need to attract the capital, and the countries were entering into war of reducing the interest rate by competing with each other. Then came the OECD negotiations, and we find that there is a global minimum tax right now that we call it as Pillar 2. And the global minimum tax now to, preempt that fight between countries to reduce the tax is now the 15%. So the corporate tax reforms have reached to a point in which there is a global minimum tax. Otherwise, what you mentioned is correct. Like the effective tax rate of the poor firms are relatively higher than the effective tax rate of the top firms. So that's, it is a story about attracting the mobile capital. Yeah.
So I just had a question about that to both of you. How does someone solve that problem where the government is doing its best? It's made the corporate tax rate very low, but the money is not being reinvested in the economy in a useful way. So is there any way that governments can address that?
The government should not be crony, because there is a kind of a state-business relations that's happening. And I'm remembering Harvard economist Lan Pritchard's book, Development and Deals. Okay. If the state-business relation is crony, then that creates inequality in the system. It's not that some people become rich or some people become poor, but if the state support a business, through the deals, that inequality is created, and that's very demoralizing, especially in the mining sector, infrastructure sector. So that's the only thing I want to add when we speak about, the corporate sector. So that cronyism is affecting, that creates inequality in the system.
No, I agree with her completely. I mean, and so the government, I'm sure the government knows why the large corporates are not investing money. Um, Almost every large corporate today has moved its family office where it manages its wealth to either Singapore or to London. Every large business family has one member of the family who's become an NRI to manage their funds abroad. So, yeah, so in some senses, there is this sense of dread, apprehension, call it what you will, and large businesses are moving their money out of the country. And I'm sure the government knows why it's happening. I mean, just two of us here. I mean, I'm a hack, and she's a renowned economist, and the government has access to a variety of brains trusts in the country, and I'm sure they know what's happening. But I guess in many ways, the way our campaign finance dynamics are structured, the government's hands are tied.
Speaking of government's hands being tied, now we have, of course, a new US president. President Trump has now begun a tariff war. And I would like to hear from both of you. How do you think that tariff war is going to start affecting India, direct ways, indirect ways? What are the... Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a clear retreat of globalization now. Like the countries, especially US, that's entering into protectionist waves. So how it's going to affect India, how we retaliate, that matters. And there is an inconsistency with the government of India. On one hand, in G20, in many forums, we agreed that there is no retreat of globalization. But if you look at the budgets, if you look at the customs announcements, we do feel that, okay, there is a protectionist wave, even by the government of India. But that is important, the way we place this game. But more than the Trump tariffs, because, India's presence, if you look at the export, it's very negligible in the global market. So what will be affecting India is more the policies related to what the Fed Reserve, the US monetary policy announces, because then our capital become flighty. Otherwise, that X minus M, the export minus import, that gap, we learn to live with. The moment the financing of that gap is stopped, if the capital becomes flighty, then we are getting worried. So more than Trump, I'm scared about the Fed Reserve of US. But now, they are not hawkish. So yeah, the interest rate is, they are giving a pause. So our RBI has got more role to play over there. Yeah.
I don't know how much Trump is going to go and implement what he's been threatening to do. Right? So some of what he's been saying is actually a step towards making deals. Braggadocio, basically, some of it he has already implemented, and some of it I think he will withdraw. He's just trying to show that he's a great deal maker and trying to do some deals. So in response, I mean, if you see this budget, very illustratively and very interestingly, the latest budget has cut down import duty on luxury yachts, on high-end automobiles, but has added back the tax through a back door. So the effective tax remains the same, but in the headline number, the luxury yacht customs duty has come down. So these are all very representational, these are all very symbolic, gestural in some ways, that, look, we are doing enough on our duties, on, reducing our customs duties, making it easier for, people to sell to India, but we've been adding the, other taxes through the back door.
But who are they speaking to with that move of cutting super luxury tax? Who is their audience for that
The
move?
influential class, which influences the policymakers in the White House, on Capitol Hill, these are the guys who have the ears of the, policy makers in Washington, D.C.
The yacht owners. So I'm going to quote from a recent piece you wrote on the budget, on budget to 2025. Ms. Chakraborty wrote, two important debates are being overlooked as economists focus on the declining growth trends in the Indian economy. One is the pressing issue of climate change, and the other is demographic transition, with a bulging elderly population in many states, including Kerala. And you've also written about green bonds and gender bonds. I mean, could you just tell us, first of all, what the issues you brought up in your piece?
Sure. Sure. My argument was to go beyond GDP because, economists are focusing just on the growth, the GDP number as the final outcome. But there should be a paradigm shift that should happen to go beyond the GDP, like looking at the climate resilience, the climate-related policies, gender, human development. That was my argument. But economists, going beyond GDP, that's a very tough game. So we are very happy to look into the growth numbers. If the growth is okay, then we assume that get naturally translate into better human development. But that's not happening, and the public policy needs to focus on that. So against that backdrop, I argued that we need to look into the climate change. But climate change, again, there is a tug of war. If you ask what is the role of bankers in climate change, Raghuram Rajan and many economists believe that you focus on your interest rate. Don't go beyond interest rate. Don't complicate RBI or any other center bank by asking to look into the climate change. But in return, economists ask, the climate change related risk and uncertainties will get into your financial instability. So you have to look into that. So the counter argument by Raghuram Rajan was that it's a political economy question. Economy should not get into political economy question because that will lead to reputation risk. So do your job. Yeah, just focus on the interest rate. Don't get into the climate change. Let fiscal policy authorities, let finance minister handle the climate change. So RBI greening of monetary policies or greening of center bank, that's quite a tough call. And now, as you said, the green bonds, the fiscal policy authorities need to, oh, sorry, I was looking at Akbar. Yeah. Oh, sure. Green bond is we focus on the fiscal policy, to do the climate change commitments more than the monetary policy authorities. So, North Block, the finance minister, he has to fill his gap, the resource gap, the deficit. So, the deficit is financed by, the bond financing. So, within that deficit financing pattern, thematically, if you can say that this is earmarked for climate change commitments and gender bonds, like in the financing pattern of deficit, you earmark, this is for addressing the gender inequalities. That's the way, the countries get into the climate bonds and the gender bonds. So it is more fiscal, it's more the policy of finance ministers to address these concerns because the monetary policy authorities, the RBI and other center banks are little shy in getting into addressing the questions related to gender, climate, etc. And also, there is ecological fiscal transfers, like the top government should give money to the lowest governments to address the ecological concerns. And India is the first country to address these concerns through Finance Commission by getting into ecological fiscal transfers. So broadly, the questions beyond GDP is now coming into the purview of the fiscal policy makers or North Block or finance ministers. So that's, I'm again turning to you. Yeah, so that's it. The climate bond is like you fix a portion of your financing of deficit to climate concerns and commitments. Yeah. Argentina has done a gender bond. Yeah, but they got into trouble because they were externally financing the deficit. So if it is externally financing, conditionalities are attached to that. So ours is predominantly internally financing. So we will not become Sri Lanka. We will not become, because it is internally. We are managing our deficits internally. So within that, earmark for your climate, earmark for addressing the gender inequalities. Yeah.
Let me just add to what Lekha just said. So this, question about what does GDP represent, and is it a correct reflection of the well-being of society, of a country, or or a community? That has been a question that has come up many times. So GDP originally, was created in the 1930s, 1940s by this economist called Simon Kuznets. And it was part of a UN exercise to be able to get an idea of how much goods and services is an economy producing within a given time period. And that now has become the end-all and be-all for measuring all kinds of well-being of society. So there has been pushback. The UN, which actually created GDP, has now gone back to the drawing table and has said that GDP doesn't actually represent, or is not a true representation of the well-being of a society. Because as she said, it doesn't quite reflect how much of climate change has created damage to your productive assets in the economy. It doesn't quite reflect the unemployment situation on the ground. It doesn't quite reflect how community ties and networks actually drives the economy. It is perverse in many ways, because if you are producing, let's say, napalm bombs, okay, destructive elements, or chemical, elements of chemical warfare, that add to GDP actually, and your GDP goes up. So in some senses, therefore, GDP may not, politicians love to use GDP and GDP growth to reflect, as a yardstick of their performance, as a report card of their performance. But as the UN, World Bank, and everybody has been saying that we need much more than GDP. We need a dashboard of many other indicators that show, so GDP, just that one number, we should go beyond that number.
Yeah. Can I add to that? Yeah, I do agree to that point that political parties, they don't want to make it a propaganda beyond GDP. Because if you look at the political parties, the Green Party, that is there in Germany, it's there in Sweden. But can you believe that in India, if a party is highlighting that, okay, you give us your mandate, we will go green, who will vote for that party? So I do completely agree with him on that point that it is not a political, it doesn't give political mileage. So it is important for them to focus on the economic growth. But as he rightly said, there are debates regarding whether this is the end result of any public policy in India. Because, if you look beyond GDP, there was a revolution that has happened in the early 90s or in the late 90s by Amartya Sen and Mehboob Haq, that look into capability deprivation of people. Then they started looking for another another index other than GDP to look into the human development. Then we constructed another index, that is human development index, focusing on prioritizing health, education and income. So it's like you're moving beyond GDP and identifying another composite index to tackle the GDP. But if you ask me whether human development index reflects the human development, I do believe that no, because it's a vast concept and we prioritized that to just education, health and income. So constricting index, that's a response to moving away from GDP. And of course, there are attempts by the government like floating time use survey. And that's a very brilliant exercise. You go and ask the people the chronology of your time, 24 hours, what exactly are you doing? So in that time use survey, you spent 8 hours. Now the debate is on, like Subramanian told that 19 hours or 90 hours, you need to be there. So the systems of national account related that market job is 8 hours or more than 8 if his recommendations are, on board. But after that, 24 hours minus 8, it is leisure and the work you've done in the unpaid sector. That itself is work. But nobody's bothered about what are the policies required for tackling that stress in that unpaid, unmonetized sector. And we know that men and women, they are very stressed. We live and we want to live authentically and fulfill our dreams. But the moment there is a stress in that sector, like caring of your elderly relative, caring of your children, then the women who are passionate about their job, they quit their job and they don't do the work. So there are issues beyond GDP, but policymakers always focus on that 8 hours of work and make policy. So that's why there is no feminization youth. That's why we don't have the brilliant women working. So if you ask me, what is the path to increase your GDP fast? Let the brilliant women on board. Like the fastest and smartest way to grow, to increase the GDP, is to have the women on board. But we don't have policies beyond GDP. Yes.
So I have a question about that point. So is that, are you calling for ways of recognizing new different forms of labor and compensating that kind of labor, or bringing them into the formal economy?
Bringing them into the formal economy, because I mentioned about the chronology of the time and the time stress. So we have employer of last resort policies, like the government came with job guarantee. But if you look at the gender differentials, they were not comfortable in taking the job because we call it as time poverty. Time poverty. And this time poverty of men and women, that affects the income-related poverty. So tackle the time poverty, then you will have increased labor force participation. It's recognizing them and to be on monetized path. Yeah.
So you actually led me to my next question, which I don't want to get away from, because this was an issue in the headlines a few months ago, I think. Where a number of corporate kind of luminaries were talking about 90-hour working weeks and 100-hour working weeks and things like that. So could you tell us something about the relationship between like the longer work week and economic growth? Is there a relationship?
I may clock in, okay, come to office and spend 18 hours in office without doing any work. Right? I mean, so spending time in office alone doesn't mean you're, doing any work. I mean, your productivity has to improve, right? You have to, even if in those 8 hours that you're in office, if you do enough, that should be good enough, right? If you have tasks to meet and you finish those tasks on time or, within a reasonable period of time, that should be good enough. So therefore, the number of hours doesn't directly lead to higher output. I think that correlation itself is flawed.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to add that I want 4 days a week, not 5. Yeah, because in France, in many countries, they are talking about 4 days a week to increase the productivity, because the importance of rejuvenation is very important. Second, it is criminal offense that if you send an email outside the office hours. So that's the way many countries are, dealing with the work. So I am in that school of thought, not by, increasing the work hours, because that is not, the work-life balance is an important, thing to discuss.
So these sort of corporate honchos who make these statements, are they saying this out of self-interest, or are they talking like, do they just want their employees to work harder or spend more time in the office? What is motivating these statements?
Productivity, that's the heartless concept of productivity. But he's right that productivity is not directly linked to, the number of hours you put. Maybe inversely related. The more hours you put, productivity may fall. For me, it's an inverse relationship. But, remember that girl, she died, E&Y. So these are the issues we are not talking. The pressure, the work pressure, the work environment. So if you provide an enabling environment, youngsters perform. But this concept of just treating them as raw materials, to get the output, that I do not agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to, stick out, go out on a limb here, okay? I think this is a reflection of their, privileged status, their entitled life that they have led. Uh, and therefore, they do not think twice about asking somebody who is at the bottom of their hierarchy to work 90 hours, 100 hours a day without really understanding the problems of that person's, daily life or, his family situation. Um, and if you look at all the companies, from where these gems, gems of wisdom have emerged. Uh, these companies, again, as I said, their CEO salaries have gone up, but the entry-level salaries have not gone up. So if you look at IT, for instance, in IT, the CEO salary has gone up by 370 times, while the entry-level employee's salary has gone up 5 to 6%. So, it is in a sense, it goes back to the whole idea of exploitative, work practices where you use entry-level employees to generate enough surplus that belongs only to you, doesn't belong to them.
I do agree with that. And this case was stronger in the pandemic times when the work from home. So we thought that, that's very beneficial, but work from home affected women. Because, their job burden, the dual work burden increased. So, yeah, you're right that, but writers, economists, journalists, we all worked maybe more than 20 hours, but it's our call. Like we always think, we are thinkers, but it's our call. So don't dictate that. We will do that. And, it's our responsibility.
I mean, I was just thinking of that exact example. All the writers I know, we just decide our own time, but sometimes you can spend many, many hours, and sometimes you spend 6 hours and get a lot more done, in that day. So,
It's our call.
yeah. Okay, I know that there'll be a lot of questions in the audience too, but I wanted to put you both on the spot one last time. So, what are two aspects of the Indian economy now that you can feel cheerful about, for everyone to feel cheerful about?
Tough one. I think there is one part of the economy that has, an opportunity to provide a lot of benefits, but obviously we're not doing much to exploit that, and that is the youth force of the economy. So 50% of India is below the age of 32 or 35 years of age, but a large part of that population doesn't have access to good education, and therefore doesn't have, thereafter doesn't have access to good jobs. And so therefore the opportunity that we have in terms of having 50% of our population below 32 or 35 years of age is fast receding. So it's, something to be hopeful about, but we're not really doing much about it.
Oh, cheerful.
Huh? One. You want me to say two? Okay. Let her finish one and then...
Oh, no, well, you say the second one because I am not cheerful. But if you put that gun on my head and ask me what is that, maybe the digital infrastructure because the poor were considered as unbankable clients. So the access to the, that infrastructure, we have not done because digital divide is there, but that access of poor to the finance, but zero balance again. I'm not cheerful, but if you put the gun on my head, I'm telling it's digital infrastructure. The way India and Kenya, we have begun that. That's quite good, but it is a continuity from the previous government. because we started talking about digital infrastructure from the previous government. So that helps in the financial inclusion. The second is, the revolution of going cashless. I'm not talking about demonetization, but the CBDC, crypto, these kind of innovations, how we are going to treat. Because it's a high risk, high return asset, and youngsters are into it. So we need to have a regulatory mechanism then banning that. And RBI is thinking about CBDC, the central bank digital currency. So we don't have to carry cash every time. But again, the divide in India, how we can go cashless, these are challenges. So as economists or as writers, we cannot say that we are completely cheerful, but we have challenges. Yeah.
Hi. You said that in India there was an aversion for economists to be political economists, right? But then looking at both of you, I think you're political enough. And I'm a layperson, but recently I've been quite inspired by Piketty's ideas on inequality and Graeber being an anarchist economist. So what would it take for India to have a generation of economists who are going to be activists, maybe not anarchists, but still with that consciousness to talk about debt relief, reparations? Like, when do you think we'd get there realistically?
After him, I'll see. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I need to thank you because this allows me to plug my book, which is outside in the bookstore. So if you look at, economics cannot be separated from politics, right? And the political economy is an intrinsic part of the whole, study of economics. And if you look at, say, financial sector reforms, my book is on the financial sector reforms. And, it seems as if, reforms happened automatically. It was an organic process. And if you look at, if you hear all the narrative and the rhetoric about reforms, it seems as if, one button was pushed and it all fell into place. But in reality, it was not like that. Because the political economy had a large role to play. As an illustration, the stock market reforms took many years because the broker community had very strong political industrial links. And therefore, their ability to halt or slow down reforms was enormous. And none of that has been documented, actually. And so, in terms of how they were able to influence the microstructure of markets, how they were able to influence the pace of reforms has not been documented. So, today, 33 years after reforms began, it's very easy for us to sit back and say, oh, we did financial sector reforms. But it was not easy. And the political economy, so what really actually then, brings me to the second point of what really makes me hopeful, not cheerful, but makes me hopeful, is that successive governments kept pushing the reforms agenda. So it was not as if, after one government went away, another political party came and reversed the reforms agenda. They kept taking it further and further because they realized that there is, benefits to be accrued through financial sector reforms, but the bigger task is tackling the political economy. Bank reforms, for instance, taken a long time to, and we're still not there. If you look at, what numbers don't tell you, again, beyond numbers, if you look at, we keep talking about low NPA, right? Low bad loans, how we have been able to slash bad loans. But that's not really the whole picture because we have written off large number of loans. I'm not going into the numbers because you're not supposed to cite numbers. Huge. Over the last 5 years, we have written off more than 10 lakh crore of loans.
Yeah. So I do agree with him, that the political economy matters. Otherwise we just become technocrats, and we have to appeal the voters. So the voters, they vote for the government in retrospect, what the government is doing for them. So the career theories of the political leaders that do matter. the way the educated leaders form the policies or non-educated leaders form the policies. Whether it is finance minister, RBI governor, their career theories and political perspectives matter. We are not technocrats. We have to look into the political economy cycle. And those economies sustain, because we need to communicate to the bureaucrats and the politicians. There we can't do alpha, beta, gamma. So we need to unpack our thoughts, and their political economy is very important as an economist. It's very important to understand that language. Yeah.
Corporate taxes were cut down and profits increased, but it did not benefit the country because these people did not expand their factories and they just enriched themselves by increasing their own salaries and their own profits. And why not the government come down drastically on a lid is put on these salaries to prevent them enriching themselves? Because even a shareholder, average shareholder may be only 1,000 shares, dividend will increase only by few thousand. But these people will be having 1 lakh or 10 lakh or even 1 million shareholders. So dividends increase, they are enriching themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is a question that you need to ask the government, perhaps. But, I guess because the government cannot really do micromanagement of how companies are run, except for raising taxes for the entire corporate sector. But I think the way, the political economy is structured at the current juncture, I don't think the government is amenable to increasing corporate taxes at the moment. And as she said, one of the reasons for lowering corporate taxes was to, attract foreign capital. So while foreign capital hasn't come, our guys also haven't invested their capital back, their profits back into new factories or new plants. So it's a loss for the entire economy, actually.
Yeah, I also want to agree to you that increase the income tax. But again, how many people are paying income tax in India? Its informal sector is very huge. Only 4% of people work in the public sector. So increasing the personal income tax also, it's confined to just 2.5% of the entire Indian population. So that also, won't trigger, the economic growth much. That's another concern. But of course, in the global financial crisis, India floated the pay commission revision. So that helped in having a stimulation in the economy. So that was okay, along with the job guarantee schemes. So we need to wait and see. It's not a magic bullet that increase the income tax and the economy will revive. Yeah, that.